You see, when it comes to love, we often expect grand gestures, flowers, declarations, endless words of affection. But for someone with an avoidant attachment style, love doesn't look like that. Love for them is not loud. It's hidden, protected, even disguised. Why? Because to an avoidant, intimacy feels risky, vulnerability feels dangerous. But here's the truth. When an avoidant is truly in love, there is always one unmistakable sign. They become consistent. Not in everything, not perfectly, but in the areas that matter most. They may not say "I love you" every day, but they'll start showing up in ways that defy their natural instincts. The very person who once pulled away when things got deep now finds themselves returning again and again. The one who avoided long conversations about feelings may suddenly make space for you in their life, and here's the secret: love has given them courage greater than their fear. Because when avoidants love deeply, they start to break their own patterns. They start to let you see pieces of their inner world. They'll risk rejection just to stay connected. And in those moments, you're not just witnessing love, you're witnessing transformation. Love for avoidance feels unsafe at first because, deep down, the idea of closeness threatens the very defense mechanisms they've built their lives around. Imagine someone who has spent years constructing strong walls around their heart, not out of malice, but out of survival. These walls aren't built because they dislike connection, but because at some point in their past, connection equaled pain, inconsistency, or abandonment. For them, intimacy isn't just about letting someone close, it's about risking being seen, known, and potentially rejected. That's why love, at its earliest stage, can feel like stepping into danger. For many avoidants, relationships start with excitement. They may enjoy the surface-level romance, the fun, the mystery. But when the bond begins to deepen, when emotions become stronger and vulnerability becomes necessary, they start to feel a subtle alarm inside. It's as if their inner voice says, "Be careful, don't get too close, don't give them the power to hurt you." This is the core struggle of the avoidant. The yearning for love collides with the fear of losing themselves in it. When love begins to grow, avoidants often wrestle internally. They want closeness, but closeness feels like a threat. They crave connection, yet connection stirs up fear. That's why, in the beginning, their love may look like distance, hesitation, or mixed signals. If you've ever been close to someone with this attachment style, you may have felt confusion. One day, they're present and affectionate, the next, they seem withdrawn or distant. It's not because they don't care, it's because the deeper they feel, the louder their fear becomes. This is why love feels unsafe, because for avoidance, intimacy is not just about two people connecting. It is about dismantling years of protective habits. Imagine asking someone who has lived in armor for decades to suddenly take it off and trust they won't be struck. That is what love demands of them, to reveal their emotions, to depend on someone, to open up. It requires undoing a lifetime of self-protection. No wonder it feels terrifying. Yet here lies the paradox. The very thing that feels unsafe is also what they long for the most. They don't avoid love because they don't need it. They avoid it because they need it so deeply, and the thought of losing it seems unbearable. To love for them is to put their heart in someone else's hands, and that surrender does not come easily. But something extraordinary happens when they meet someone patient, grounded, and consistent. Over time, the unsafe feeling begins to shift. What once felt dangerous can start to feel like safety. What once felt like a threat can become a refuge. The very walls they built to survive begin to loosen, not because they forced them down, but because love proved it could be trusted. In those moments, love transforms from something frightening into something healing. The avoidant begins to experience that true intimacy isn't about losing control. It's about gaining freedom, the freedom to be fully themselves without fear of abandonment. That is why their journey into love is so profound. Unlike those who find closeness natural and easy, for an avoidant, every step toward intimacy is an act of courage. Every choice to stay when their instinct is to run is a silent declaration that love matters more than fear. So when we say that love feels unsafe at first for avoidants, it isn't a sign of weakness or incapability. It's a reflection of their strength in surviving past wounds And when they choose to love despite that fear, it's one of the bravest acts they can ever offer. Love, in its purest form, is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward in spite of it, and for the avoidant, that journey is nothing short of heroic. The secret sign that an avoidant is deeply in love is emotional consistency. To understand why this is so powerful, you have to recognize how unnatural it is for an avoidant to remain steady in relationships. Their instinct is usually to pull back when emotions intensify, to create space whenever intimacy becomes too close. They've trained themselves to survive by retreating into independence, by convincing themselves that needing someone else is weakness. But when real love enters their life, something remarkable begins to shift. Suddenly, the very person who was once unpredictable with their availability starts to show a different rhythm. Their presence becomes more dependable, their communication steadier, and their actions more aligned with care. This consistency isn't loud or dramatic, it's quiet, subtle, but unmistakable. It looks like them remembering the small details about your life, showing up when they say they will, and checking in even when words about love don't come easily. For avoidants, emotional consistency is the clearest proof of love because it contradicts their natural defense system. Instead of fleeing when feelings deepen, they keep returning. Instead of hiding when vulnerability appears, they find themselves drawn closer. And this doesn't mean they suddenly transform into someone overflowing with words of affection. Rather, it means they begin building reliability into the relationship. They begin offering the one thing they normally withhold, emotional presence. That presence becomes their way of saying, "I love you," even if the words take time to arrive. This is why consistency is the secret sign. It's not about grand gestures, but about steady commitment. When avoidants show emotional consistency, they are essentially rewriting their inner script. For so long, that script told them that closeness equals danger. But now, in love, they're willing to challenge that belief. They begin to test whether being present, dependable, and emotionally available might not lead to the rejection they once feared. This is a monumental step because consistency is not easy for someone who has built their life around unpredictability as a shield. Every consistent action is a silent declaration of love, a decision to choose connection over self-protection. If you look closely, you'll notice this shift. The missed calls become fewer. The check-ins come without being asked. The person who once shut down during emotional conversations now lingers just a little longer, listens just a little deeper. The beauty of this secret sign is that it's not fragile. Words can be said without meaning, but consistency is built over time. It proves itself through repetition. For avoidance, sustaining that pattern requires deep emotional investment. They don't do it casually. They don't fake it. They only commit to consistency when they feel something so strong that it outweighs their fears. That's why, when you see it, you can trust it. It means love has taken root in a way they can no longer deny. And here's what makes this transformation even more profound. Emotional consistency for an avoidant is not just about how they treat their partner, it changes how they see themselves. By showing up for someone else, they also start showing up for parts of themselves they've long ignored. They discover that stability doesn't suffocate them, it liberates them. They learn that love doesn't have to be chaos, it can be peace. Their consistency becomes healing, not only for the relationship, but for their own growth. So when you notice an avoidant becoming steady, reliable, and emotionally present, understand that you're witnessing something rare. You're seeing love expressed in its truest form for them. It may not be dramatic. It may not always be verbal, but it is real, powerful, and deeply meaningful. Emotional consistency is their love letter written not in ink, but in actions. It's their way of saying, "You matter, I choose to stay." And for someone who once believed closeness was unsafe, that is the loudest declaration of love they could ever give. Avoidants often struggle with verbal declarations of love, but when they truly fall deeply, their actions begin to reveal what their words cannot. This is why actions over words is such a vital keynote in understanding how they express love. For many avoidants, saying "I love you" feels overwhelming, exposing, and even unsafe. Words can feel like traps because they carry the weight of expectation, But actions, on the other hand, become their safe pathway to communicate what their heart feels but their mouth resists. When you look closely at someone with an avoidant style, you'll notice that when love is genuine, they start shifting their behavior in powerful, meaningful ways. It begins with subtle gestures. They might make time for you in their schedule, even though independence has always been their priority. They may start remembering the details of your life, what you like, what you dislike, the little things that make you happy, and they act on them. This is not random, it's intentional. Their actions reflect care, thoughtfulness, and presence. Instead of grand romantic speeches, they might quietly ensure you get home safely, fix something that's been bothering you, or show up when they know you're struggling. Each action is their silent way of saying, I see you, I care about you, and I choose you. For an avoidant, these behaviors are monumental because they go against their natural instinct to withdraw. When someone with an avoidant attachment style starts leaning in, investing energy, and showing care through action, it means their love has crossed a threshold. It's no longer about protecting themselves, it's about protecting the connection. Words may still come slowly, but their actions will shout the truth louder than anything else could. It's important to recognize the difference between words and actions in the context of avoidant love. Many people say things they don't fully mean, sometimes out of pressure, sometimes out of habit, but avoidants don't act in ways that contradict their true feelings. Their defenses are too strong for empty gestures. So when their actions start to consistently show effort, dependability, and thoughtfulness, you can trust it's coming from a real place of love. They won't invest their time and energy unless it deeply matters. Think about it like this. Actions are the bridge between their fear and their love. They may not be able to tell you everything they feel, but they'll show up to prove it. They'll prioritize you, even when it feels uncomfortable for them. They'll break their patterns of avoidance, little by little, because their love has grown stronger than their defenses. And the beauty of this is that actions, unlike words, are undeniable. They can't be misinterpreted when they are repeated over time. A consistent pattern of loving actions becomes the avoidant's true declaration. This is why if you want to understand whether an avoidant is deeply in love, don't listen only to what they say. Watch what they do. Do they show up? Do they create space for you in their life? Do they quietly support you in ways that require effort? That is where their love lives. Their silence doesn't mean absence. It often means that their love is speaking through action, reliability, and presence. And here's the transformative part. Once you begin to trust their actions, you'll see how much vulnerability it takes for them to show up this way. Every act of care is a risk for them, a step outside of their comfort zone. It is love pushing them to grow, to break free from old patterns, to move closer even when every instinct tells them to run. That's why their actions hold so much weight. They are not casual. They are not given lightly. They are proof of something real, something deep, something enduring. So remember, for an avoidant, love is not often spoken, but it is lived. It is lived in the quiet ways they make your life easier, in the consistency they build into your days, and in the subtle sacrifices they make to show you that you matter. Their words may be few, but their actions are profound. When you see those actions align with love, you're witnessing the purest form of truth they can offer, the truth that they are deeply, wholeheartedly in love. One of the most powerful signs that an avoidant is deeply in love is when they begin breaking patterns. Avoidants are creatures of habit, and their habits are not random. They are deeply ingrained survival strategies. Their patterns often revolve around distance, self-reliance, emotional withdrawal, and keeping others at arm's length. These patterns have protected them for years, sometimes decades. They've convinced themselves that closeness is dangerous, that vulnerability equals pain, and that self-sufficiency is the only path to safety. But when love becomes real, something shifts inside of them. Slowly, quietly, almost against their own will, they begin to step outside those patterns. And every time they do, it's not just a behavioral change, it's a profound act of courage. Breaking patterns for an avoidant can look like staying present in a moment of conflict instead of shutting down and walking away. It can look like reaching out first instead of waiting for the other person to initiate. It might mean allowing someone into their private world, sharing details of their life that they usually guard with intensity. Sometimes it's as simple as allowing closeness without pulling back, letting a hug linger longer than before, or opening up about a fear they usually bury. Each of these moments might seem small on the surface, but for an avoidant, they are groundbreaking. They are evidence that love is winning over fear. What makes this so significant is that avoidant patterns are not easy to undo. They are deeply wired responses to past experiences, often pain, rejection, or abandonment. These patterns feel safe, predictable, and controllable. To break them, the avoidant has to confront their own discomfort. They have to sit in the very vulnerability they've spent their lives avoiding. That is why when they start breaking patterns, you can be sure it is not casual. It is driven by something stronger than fear, love. Love gives them a reason to challenge their inner script. When they care deeply about someone, they begin to ask themselves questions they've never asked before. What if staying close won't hurt me this time? What if opening up will actually deepen this bond instead of destroying it? What if trusting this person is worth the risk? These questions begin to chip away at their old patterns, creating space for new behaviors to emerge. And though progress may not be linear, sometimes they'll fall back into old habits. Love keeps nudging them forward. Breaking patterns is also a gift to the relationship itself. Imagine being with someone who has always run at the first sign of emotional intensity, and then one day, instead of running, they stay. Imagine someone who never spoke about their inner world suddenly sharing their fears, their dreams, their doubts. That moment is not just about them growing. It's about them choosing connection over isolation. It's about rewriting the rules of how they relate to others. For their partner, these shifts may feel like small victories, but in truth, they are monumental breakthroughs. And here's the deeper truth. Breaking patterns doesn't just show love, it builds it. Every time an avoidant chooses to stay instead of leave, to speak instead of remain silent, to lean in instead of pull away, they are strengthening their bond. They are teaching themselves that love can be safe, that intimacy can be healing, that vulnerability can lead to connection instead of pain. Each pattern they break becomes a brick removed from the walls around their heart, creating more space for love to flow in and out. So when you see an avoidant begin to break their patterns, recognize the significance. They are not just behaving differently, they are transforming. They are taking the boldest steps of their life, steps that go against years of conditioning, because someone has become important enough to make the risk worth it. It is love pushing them to evolve, to grow beyond fear, to become more open than they ever believed possible. That is why breaking patterns is such a powerful sign of love. It is the evidence that the avoidant is not only feeling deeply, but also willing to change in ways that once seemed unimaginable. Trust is the gateway for an avoidant to truly fall in love, and without it, the walls around their heart remain nearly unbreakable. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, trust is not something that comes quickly or easily. Their past experiences may have taught them that opening up leads to disappointment, that relying on someone means exposing themselves to hurt, or that closeness often ends with betrayal. Because of this, they approach relationships with a built-in shield. They keep their emotions guarded, their vulnerabilities hidden, and their dependence on others as minimal as possible. Yet when love begins to take root, the only way it can truly grow is through trust. And for an avoidant, this is the most difficult but also the most transformative part of their journey. When trust begins to form, it is rarely dramatic or obvious. It doesn't look like a sudden flood of emotion or an immediate opening of the heart. Instead, it begins in subtle ways. An avoidant may start by sharing a personal story they would normally keep hidden, or by allowing someone to see a weakness they usually mask. They might test the waters by leaning on another person in small ways, watching carefully to see how it's received. If they find acceptance instead of judgment, presence instead of abandonment, the seeds of trust begin to sprout. And though it may be slow, each moment of reassurance builds a foundation that allows them to step closer. Trust is the doorway because it's the first time the avoidant realizes that vulnerability may not equal destruction. With trust, they begin to feel safe enough to expose the parts of themselves that they've buried for years. They allow themselves to be seen more fully. They take risks that once felt impossible. They might reach out for comfort when they're struggling, admit fears they've always carried alone, or reveal dreams they've never told anyone. These aren't just random acts of sharing, they are signs that trust has started to open a door that was once locked tight. The process is not always smooth. Avoidance may retreat at times, pulling back out of habit or fear. But the difference is that when trust is present, they come back, they repair, they try again. This willingness to return after retreating is one of the clearest signs that trust has taken hold. Before, they might have walked away permanently, convinced that distance was safer. Now, with trust, they're willing to stay and rebuild because the connection has become too meaningful to abandon. For the avoidant, trust is not just about believing in another person. It's about learning to believe that they themselves are worthy of being loved, accepted, and supported. This is what makes it such a profound gateway. Once they start trusting someone else, they also begin challenging their own internal narrative that they must face life alone. They start experiencing love not as a threat, but as a safe space to grow. This shift doesn't just transform the relationship, it transforms the avoidant's view of themselves. And when an avoidant gives trust, it is one of the most precious gifts they can offer. They don't hand it out lightly. They don't give it without thought. If they trust you, it means you've shown consistency, patience, and acceptance strong enough to break through their defenses. It means you've created an environment where their fears can soften and their heart can finally take risks. To receive an avoidant's trust is to be handed the keys to the most protected parts of their soul. That is why trust is the gateway. Without it, love cannot deepen. With it, the walls begin to fall, the patterns begin to shift, and the relationship takes on a depth that was once unimaginable. For the avoidant, trust is not just about the other person proving themselves. It's about them choosing to believe, choosing to risk, and choosing to love despite their fear. And once that doorway is open, love has the chance to flow in a way that is steady, real, and life-changing. Patience is the key that unlocks connection with an avoidant, and without it, love can easily be misunderstood or even lost. Avoidants are not quick to open their hearts. Their defenses are strong, their walls are tall, and their instinct to retreat is deeply ingrained. If you rush them, pressure them, or demand from them what they are not yet ready to give, their natural response is to pull further away. That is why patience is not just a virtue in loving an avoidant. It is the very foundation of building trust, intimacy, and long-term connection. Patience allows you to see beyond their initial hesitation and recognize that their distance is not a lack of care but a sign of fear. Many avoidants are not withholding love because they don't feel it. They're withholding because love to them feels risky. They've often learned from the past that vulnerability leads to disappointment, so they pace themselves slowly when letting someone in. Without patience, these pauses can be misinterpreted as rejection. But when you stay steady, consistent, and calm, you provide the very safety they need to keep moving closer. This patience shows up in the small moments. It's choosing not to take their withdrawal personally when they need space. It's listening without judgment when they reveal something vulnerable. It's offering consistency instead of pushing for faster progress. Over time, your patience becomes proof. Proof that love doesn't have to suffocate. Proof that connection can exist without pressure. Proof that they can move at their own pace and still be accepted. This is what slowly dissolves their fear and invites them to open their heart. The beauty of patience is that it doesn't just benefit the avoidant, it benefits the relationship as a whole, because love that is rushed often burns out quickly, but love that is nurtured with patience has the chance to grow roots. Avoidants, once they feel safe, are capable of deep loyalty and genuine devotion, but those qualities only emerge when they feel no one is trying to force them into a space they're not ready for. Patience allows their love to unfold naturally, layer by layer, until what you have is not just fleeting affection, but a bond built on real trust and understanding. For the avoidant, every step forward is an act of courage. It may take them longer to say I love you, longer to share their emotions, longer to fully merge their lives with someone else, but with patience, each of those steps becomes meaningful and lasting. They don't take connection lightly, so when they finally choose to give it, it's authentic. And it's patience that makes this possible, because patience tells them, I'm not here to pressure you, I'm here to walk with you. Without patience, their instinct for self-protection wins. With patience, their instinct for love has room to grow. It is the gentle force that helps them break patterns, trust more deeply, and offer consistency. It creates an environment where their natural fears are met with reassurance instead of criticism. And in that environment, love doesn't just survive, it thrives. So patience is not passive, it is active love. It's choosing to wait without resentment, choosing to support without control, choosing to believe in the potential of the bond even when progress feels slow. For the avoidant, patience is the clearest signal that they are safe, accepted, and worthy of being loved without conditions. And once they feel that, they are able to give a kind of love that is steady, strong, and deeply enduring. Patience doesn't just unlock their heart. It transforms the entire relationship into something unshakable.